Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Bophelong. On your weekly dose of inspiration this week, we explore the complex subject of reconciliation, particularly the journey of forgiveness and healing the traumas of the past. My name is Pule Molebati. Thank you for choosing us as your source of information. Candice's mama was 9 months when her father was shot and set alight by apartheid operatives in 1992. Her father was a 25-year-old activist from Soweto. Here is his story.
Not long ago, Eugene de Kock was still one of the most powerful and feared policemen. Commander of the police death squad, based at a farm called Vlakplaas. A man who could decide who would live and who would die.
Hi, my name is Candice's mama, and my father was brutally murdered by Eugene de Kock.
He was a monster. He doesn't value life. He was just a killing machine, a very violent war machine. To him, a black life meant nothing. He's just a genius. He's a man that's expert in his field. I can tell you he's a snake.
In 2014, I met up with Eugene and I decided to forgive him.
Candice's father, Glenek Masilo Mama, was brutally killed in a vicious and unjust time in our country's history. Her memories of him were nothing but compilations of different people's stories and pictures collected over time.
When you grow up without a father, you don't realize you don't have a father because it's normal. You grow up without any figure that you're necessarily missing in a household. I think for me, when I really started realizing was when I went to school. And I saw that other people have two parents. There's a man in the house and there's, a woman. And my grandmother, was a part of our lives for a long time, and she was just a filler. So we didn't feel the emptiness.
One thing she knew for sure about her father was that he was tortured and then burned to death by a man named Eugene de Kock.
I knew my father was killed. I knew Eugene de Kock killed him. I had no idea who Eugene de Kock really was. And it was just, a natural thing, like, your father's dead, so, that happened and we move on.
Growing up in a house where reading and introspection were encouraged allowed her to be able to contextualize her father's killing.
It was actually a book that my mom would show to friends. My mom had purchased the book and she would show it to friends when people would visit. And being a curious, 9-year-old kid, I always used to wonder, like, why can't we see this? I want to see what everyone else sees. And one day when my mom had left the house, I'd always remembered like eavesdropping and listening to like more or less where it would be in the book, in my page. And after a couple of times, I realized which page it would be on. And everyone's reaction was the same when they'd see this book. And I was like, I want to know what's shocking everyone so much. And one day when my mom had left the house, I went and I got out this book and I just opened the page and I saw, and it's the only picture there, which is, the burnt body. And I was shocked and I was scared and I just closed it and I put it away and I left because I was like, if I tell anyone, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble.
And life changed after finding most answers through a book she was never meant to see in her childhood.
It wasn't so much the external validation I needed, because I just thought to myself, if I confess this, I'm going to get a beating. And I did not want a beating. So I just thought, okay, I'll be fine with it, whatever. So I pushed it to the back of my mind, or so I thought. However, my behavior did start to change. I became a lot more aggressive, a lot angrier. I just became a rebel in school. Like, I was doing things that were just ridiculous. I was a bully in primary school and I was just mean. And I started really acting it out. And I think for the first time, it was when my character started to change. I went from this carefree, loving child who just laughed at everything to just this awful human being who was just terrible to be around. And no one understood why.
The only way to pour the perfect beer, this professional barman would tell you, is into a glass tilted at exactly 45 degrees. Oh, bless you. Bless you, sir. Bless you again. Well, we'd say the perfect way to pour a beer is at this angle, straight into your mouth.
Get a 12-pack of 500ml Carling Black Label cans for only $117.99 from Tops at Spar.
Corruption both in the public and the private sectors needs to be combated.
Where there are clear cases of wrong that has been done, that must commence immediately.
Something is being done about corruption in our country.
Currency, even although it's strengthened dramatically after the ANC's recent elective conference, could conceivably go stronger yet.
He had a soul that would not be for sale.
Stay tuned to Your World for your final news roundup, Monday to Sunday at 21:30.
Robots, automation and artificial intelligence are becoming an increasingly important part of our lives.
We love the term disruptive technologies.
Parents and caregivers are taking part in Facebook.
On Network, we give you Africa's technology and social media news.
My favorite piece of technology is the microwave.
The reason why I can't live without my cell phone is because I do everything on my cell phone.
For all your technology news, catch Network with Spumelele Zondi on Saturdays at 8:30 p.m.
Eugene Alexander de Kok, I find you guilty of the murder of 6 people, conspiracy to murder, attempted murder, assault, kidnapping, illegal possession of firearms, and fraud.
Eugene de Kok, as many people may know, was called one of the chief architects of apartheid only because he was the colonel in charge of the police force, and so he carried out a lot of hits. He was imprisoned for, I think it was 212 years in prison, 89 counts or something like that. So he was, revered as like prime evil. He was known as this criminal mastermind that was a part of the apartheid system. So when I found out about Eugene, I didn't know all these facts. I just knew him as, the man who killed my father. But growing up, I really got into researching who he is as a person. And in the duration of just getting to know him as this evil person, he was just a monster to me. I didn't give him an identity except this monster who carried out atrocious acts, not just to me and my family, but to so many other families.
In September 2014, the National Prosecuting Authority reached out to the Mama family.
Of course, it came as a shock when I was around 23 and I came home and my mom was like, I got a call from the National Prosecuting Authority and they want to know if we'd like to meet Eugene. And I thought to myself, wait, what? And I said yes immediately because I'd gone on a journey of forgiveness prior. So going to Kgosimampura was quite a day. Like, it started very early. The MPA was going to come pick up myself and my family and take us to Kgosimampura prison. And I've got a very light-hearted family. We managed to make jokes about pretty much everything. But this time it was different. All of us were a little anxious, and my older brother wasn't going to come, but he decided to come on the day. So we got to Kgosimampura prison, and when we got there, it was actually quite an affair. It was this long table, and it was the priest, it was the counselor, it was the director of the prison, and it was the 3 MPA members we got there with. And they set out this table and they were like, let's have coffee and tea first and just have a little bit of a conversation of what's about to unfold, and then, you'll meet Eugene.
At age 23, she finally came face to face with the man who took away not only her father, but so many others, friends, husbands, and sons.
And I turned around because his chair was like here. So if it's a boardroom table, there were 2 chairs here. It was the priest here, the empty chair there for Eugene, and then it was myself, my younger brother, my older brother, my grandfather, and my mother. So going that way, and then MPA and others filled the room. So I turned around to this empty chair and it was no longer empty. And I was like, oh my God, that's him. He's sitting right there. At first I was like, how did he get in here? How did we not notice this man walk in here? So I tapped my brother and he was like, oh. And then the room went silent. And I think the priest realized that, okay, you know, we're all in shock here. And that's when the dialogue began. And the priest introduced the dialogue and he said, you know, please do understand you are free to ask Eugene anything you'd like, you know. And he introduced us to Eugene, Eugene to us. And he was like, you know, that's Sandra, mama, wife of the deceased Glenn Masilo, mama. That's Roy, father, my older brother Ashley, Voya, myself. And with each of us, Eugene would lean forward and he'd say, good to meet you, you know, pleasure to meet you, and whatever. So finally, the priest said, okay, so you guys are free to talk. Who wants to, you know, ask Eugene anything?
Her mother led the line of questioning.
My mom, thank goodness, took the, you know, initiative, and she said, you know, Eugene, I firstly want to know, you know, what happened to my husband. And that's when he ran us through the entire story. He said, you know, we implanted an Ascari into the PAC camp, which my father was a part of, and we asked them to get, you know, some of the best and most skilled, promising young drivers to drive into Nelspruit. And the Ascari did so, and what happened was my father was the one who was going to be driving this minibus. So they were driving into Nelspruit. The Ascari got off at a point and he said, oh, just follow that car, you know, they'll lead you to where you're going, I'll catch up with you guys later. As they kept on driving, they were approaching the Nelspruit bridge when gunfire started raining on the car. When Eugene saw that the car wasn't coming to a halt, he ran down the Nelspruit bridge and he emptied out his magazine cartridge on my father. When he realized that there were still signs of life in the vehicle, he continued to douse them in fuel and then he set them all alight. They waited for the minibus to burn out and then they placed guns in there and they reported it in, and on the news that morning it said terrorists were shot in a shootout in Nelspruit. So that was the story Eugene told us. It was hard. I mean, it's still hard. Like, even when I talk about the story, and I now have spoken about the story for about 3 years, and I still get chills. My skin still stands, because just going back to that moment, it's still a very tough moment, you know. And I think for me it was, I didn't know that this man would even remember who my father was, considering how many people he'd killed. And for him to break it down like that, to tell us exactly what time of day it was, to tell us why they had been waiting there, that they were just waiting, and it was just, you know, like just the details. And I remember just being shocked. I didn't even have time to comprehend who else was feeling it, but in the room you could feel there was an energy. It was just a static, very quiet energy. After that, my mom was like, okay, but I want to know why my husband? And I think that was the moment for me that I felt the most, I just felt broken. I just wanted to, you know, and he said, no reason. There was no reason. Your husband had to die that day. And for me, I was like, what? You know, like, I wish there was a reason. I wish you had said, you know, they were fighting and there was going to be some, but when he said no reason, I really felt shattered. And after that, I don't think anyone else had any more questions, because there was just nothing to ask.
This is a copy of her late father's case docket that was given to her by the NPA.
And in this case docket, basically you just see how the police had taken pictures of the scene. They showed, you know, where exactly the car was coming from which direction, where the bridge was. It's labeled over there. And there's the bridge, the Nelspruit Bridge, and it just shows all the markings of where the cab came to an end, you know, all the other cars that were around in that scene. And of course, those are still aerial shots of the, it talks about who took the pictures, you know, who carried out the report, how they reported it. It is all in Afrikaans, because back in the day, you know, they just reported in Afrikaans. And then here's the burnt cab that my father had been driving. You can see how it really did not make it in this. And over here, all the pieces that fell off, you know, due to the fuel. And here as well, you just see them really analyzing it, looking at the burn marks. There are quite a few pictures of that. And here's more. So it just shows how the car was really burnt out from the inside over here, and the fuel tank, how it exploded, and over here. So my father had been sitting over here. So as you can see, there's a lot of ash, which is a part, obviously, his ashes himself. And yeah, The bullet holes are marked. And yes, so this is where my father was. In the book, Into the Heart of Darkness, you actually see how Jock Poe got the picture from this angle. So you just see my father's burned body clutching the steering wheel.
With every question asked and every answer given, Candace's empathy grew for this complete stranger.
He was very empathetic. You know, he tried to make sure that everything we wanted to know would be answered in that meeting. And he would lean forward and he would, you know, make sure that we hear him. And he was very, you know, he wasn't, you know, crass about it. He was just making sure that we got what we wanted out of the meeting. As the meeting went on, it was, you know, we just started engaging in just random conversation. And to close it off, my mom said, you know, Eugene, I forgive you. My grandfather said, I forgive you. My older brother said, I forgive you. My younger brother was like, I just don't want to be at school. I'm not a part of this. And I was like, you know, Eugene, I want to say I forgive you, but I need to ask you one question. And he said, yeah, no, sure, okay. And he said, and I said to him, you know, do you forgive yourself? And he kind of rambled about something and he came back and I said, you didn't answer my question. And he looked away and he like wiped the side of his eye. And it was just, yeah, he was so emotional and he turned back to me and he said, every time a family comes here to see me, that's one thing I hope they never ask. And he said, and he looked away and he kept quiet and he said, when you've done the things I've done, how can you forgive yourself? And in that moment, I just broke down. All of a sudden, I saw a human being sitting in front of me. I didn't see this monster. I didn't see this external villain. I saw a victim. I saw someone who had perpetrated and he had been the, you know, the cause of my pain. However, he too was in pain and he too was a victim. And in that moment, I couldn't help it. I had to say, you know, look, I forgive you. I do forgive you. And in that moment, all my defenses were down and I just, you know, it was just an authentic, genuine human experience of, you know, connection.
As former statesman Nelson Mandela said, forgiveness liberates the soul.
I was so emotional at the time. I got up and I went to him and I said, would you mind if I gave you a hug? And he kind of looked at me like, wait, what? Like, are you okay? And he was very hesitant and he got up and he embraced me and he said, you know, I'm so sorry for what I've done. And your father would have been so proud of the woman you've become. And in that moment, you know, I just held on to him and I was like, you know, you'll be okay. You'll be okay. I hope that in some way we help, you know, we help you feel or release the pain. And by the end of the meeting, all of us, we were still in a very dazed space. It was a little crazy. However, we felt, you know, in that moment, we felt we'd accomplished something as a family, you know, that none of us were being held back by this resentment. I was like, we need to take a picture, you know, like I want to take a picture so that I can tell my kids one day about this moment.
No. Yes. Yes.
Sports Live every Saturday and Sunday at 7:30 p.m.
First and I went to him and I said,
Candace's mama now calls herself a forgiveness advocate and a happiness activist. She's also an award-winning speaker and a change agent.
After I forgave Eugene, I realized something incredibly strange, that I had been the one who had been in prison the entire time. So, are you imprisoned?
And moving forward, I got to a space where I thought to myself, I think I've forgiven this person. And what it made me realize was that this whole time, when I thought I was punishing Eugene, I was actually punishing myself. Because he was out there living his life, in prison, whatever it was. And I was the one still suffering with the repercussions of his actions. So when I realized that I'd liberated myself and I'd freed myself from this burden, it was the greatest gift I could have given myself.
She has spoken at global events around the world and was the 2017 Human Dignity Award recipient at Columbia University.
And that's when I really started getting into this work and wanting to implement change and wanting people to just not be defined by their past. To know that, yes, this happened to you, but it doesn't have to define you for the rest of your life. And that's why I got into the space of speaking on forgiveness and reconciliation and moving forward.
I think it's fair to say that at one point or another, all of us have had to grapple with the concept of forgiveness, right? So, what is forgiveness? I've researched a little, and the Oxford Dictionary definition is to let go of anger and resentment. Most of us would agree with that. It makes sense. There's not much to add. It's just there. But the definition that sticks out to me is the conscious and deliberate decision to let go of resentment and anger.
Candace says she believes as we learn, we must teach, so the world becomes a kinder place.
To do so conscious and deliberate, and it's a decision.
It's not as hard for me to forgive now as it was, maybe a couple of years ago. And I think that is with everyone, as soon as you understand the process, and especially as soon as you understand how much power you have through forgiveness, that's when you really claim back your power, when you say, you did me wrong. I'm going to experience the pain. I'm going to experience the anger, because that's so important in the whole forgiveness process. I'm going to feel it. I'm going to be angry at you, and then I'm going to let it go.
Does she wish her father was still alive, and would life be any different?
I look at my friends and I look at the relationships they have with their fathers, and I'm like, wow, I really wish I had that, I look at one day when I get married, I won't have my father walking me down the aisle. So these things do make me a little emotional sometimes. However, the only thing for me that really gives me comfort is that I'm redefining who my father is to the world. He was some nameless, faceless terrorist, and now he's got a name, and people know of him, and they know that he had a family that he loved, and he's a representation of so many people who'll never be represented in the media, who lost family and loved ones in apartheid, and the fact that I get to redefine his legacy, to me, that's enough for me.
De Kock has since been released from prison on parole after serving 20 years.
I was very intent on him getting parole after our meeting, and it wasn't just because of our encounter, and I think this is very important to understand. It wasn't because I felt, oh my goodness, I'm forgiving you now, everyone should forgive you. It was based on the other encounters people had had. So I spoke to Madeleine Fullard, who's the head of the MPA, and I said to her, how do other people receive him? How do other people act in these situations? I don't know, because you start questioning your normal. You start questioning everything you did. I questioned who I was after that encounter. I was like, oh, I hugged the man who killed my father, with my father. How would my father feel about that? So it was a very emotional time in our lives. However, I called Madeleine and I said, I want to know how other families receive this man. And she retold a certain story about, how a family came in and the lady was so upset, and she started throwing like cutlery at him and plates and, everything. And security tried to restrain her. And he said, please, let her get it out. What the damage I've done to her, she'll never be able to do to me on the physical. So if this will help her release, then please, let her do it. I deserve it. And other things, it was that story and other stories about how, he's helping locate bodies, and he's helping, trying to bring resolve in his own way. I'm not saying he's a saint. I'm not saying it wipes his past, but I am saying that he is trying. And for me, the fact that he is more of use to the MPA outside of prison than he is inside, because he can really take them to the bodies to help people, bury their loved ones. I thought, there's no point in this man staying in prison. He's not going to redo what he did. However, he will be able to bring a lot of comfort to people who have never buried their loved ones. So for me, that was the huge point of him getting parole. I thought, this man really needs to get out of here to go help other families. I know sometimes talking about a story like Eugene de Kock just seems so out there. Most people, thankfully, will never have to deal with forgiving something like a murder of a family member. However, we all go through our own pains. There are different types of pains we have to forgive. Heartbreak, family neglect, things that happen to us. And in those moments, we have to choose ourselves and say, I refuse to be defined by what someone else has done to me. I refuse to be a prisoner in this system of hate and resentment. We feel our pain, and then we have to let go of our pain so that when we move into the future, we are not holding this baggage, and we redefine our own narratives.
Candice, thank you for sharing your story with us today. And remember, at home, if you'd like to share your story, perhaps something similar, you can also get in touch with us. Our contact details are at the bottom of your screen. As we reflect on forgiveness today, remember to always live, love, and love. Goodbye, Africa.